Okay, welcome everyone. It's Friday morning. We're going to do a Rashi from the sixth Aliyah of our combined parshios, the Acharei Kedoshim. So much to talk about in these parshios. These are really wonderful ones, packed with so many different mitzvos and so many different aspects of important aspects of Jewish life. As Rashi notes, the beginning of the parsha, it's a parsha sherov gufei Torah tiluyim bo. It's a parsha, as Luis Kedoshim is, that the majority of gufei Torah, the majority of bodies of Torah, meaning the essence of Torah, is connected back in some way or another, either loosely or tightly, to the mitzvahs found in this parsha. So a very important one. Many of the mitzvahs that are mentioned in the Acharei Hadibros are reiterated over here. It's a repeat in a certain way of Matan Torah at this stage of Jewish history. And we're going to look at one in particular, which I think is interesting for us. As part of the series of mitzvahs and parshas Kedoshim, the Torah tells us, "Es shabsosai tishmoru, umikdashi tirau, ani Hashem." You should keep my Shabbases, and you should have awe or fear, yira, of my mikdash. I am God. So Ani Hashem, I'm not going to comment on right now. That's a theme that repeats itself many, many times in this parsha. Why certain mitzvahs have Ani Hashem attached at the end, certain mitzvahs don't. We'll leave for a discussion for another time. We'll suffice in this moment to say that many of the mitzvahs that are connected with us trying to be like God, or trying to be in God's spaces, or trying to emulate God in some way, have an Ani Hashem at the end for obvious reasons. I'm God and I'm holy, so you should be holy as well, like the beginning of Parshas Kedoshim. So here too, it's Mikdash related, it's Shabbos related. I am Hashem. By us engaging with holiness in time, Shabbos, and in space, the Mikdash, then we become more godlike as well. So Ani Hashem fits very well into the context of our pasuk. But I want to comment a little bit on Mikdashi Tirau and on the juxtaposition of Shabbos and the Mikdash contained in this parsha. So Rashi tells us, what is Mikdashi Tirau? How are we supposed to have awe of a place? I understand I'm supposed to have awe and reverence of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, but what does it mean to have awe and reverence of a place? So Chazal gave very particular instructions that come out of the mitzvah of Mora Mikdash, of fearing the Mikdash that is contained in this pasuk. And Rashi quotes some of them over here. Mikdashi Tirau, Lo yikanes la mikdash, lo b'maklo, uveminalo, uveafundaso, ve'avak shel raglav. You should not enter the space of the mikdash with your walking stick, with your shoes, with your wallet, with dirty feet. All of those are part of the concretization or manifestation of this mitzvah of Mora Mikdash, of having an awe and reverence of the Mikdash. This is fascinating even in our time when we unfortunately don't have a Beis HaMikdash, because this also translates to the halachos of a shul. There are many halachos of a shul as well mentioned in Shulchan Aruch and later poskim. For example, and I'm not saying this as an overgeneralization because there are situations where it's warranted, but in general sense, one is not allowed to walk into shul with boots, with winter boots, with overshoes, with things that are appropriate for, snow and mud and those kinds of things, but perhaps not appropriate in the sanctity of a shul. Just like you would take those off when you go into someone's house in a private domain, you would take those off in a certain way of reverence, showing your perception of Kedusha, of that place of the synagogue as well, the shul as well, just like in the case of Mora Mikdash. Not only does it apply to shuls, but some of these halachos also apply to the Har HaBayis today. So we can't go on all parts of the Har HaBayis because some are retained for Kohanim, for Kedusha, Kodesha Kodashim, but there are parts of the Har HaBayis we are allowed to go on. And even if generally people don't visit those places, or those places are restricted in terms of visits because right now of the control of other nations of that area, without getting too political, nonetheless, soldiers of the IDF routinely have to go up for guard duty onto the Har HaBayis, and many of these halachos apply to them. Are they allowed to go with a gun? Are they allowed to go with their army boots? Are they allowed to go with a wallet in their pocket? What accommodations do they have to make when they're going to Har HaBayis? So this halacha, this pasuk, which is quoted by Rashi in terms of these manifestations, may seem like odd to us and from a different planet and a different era, but I'm just pointing out they're actually quite relevant to us as well, not only through the particulars of how it manifests, like with shoes or with wallets or sticks or those kinds of things, but also in a general sense of how we appreciate spaces of Kedusha, how we walk into our shul, like the Shulchan Aruch said, do we, run into our shul, racing in and bashing down the door like, we would in other spaces, or do we walk calmly with a certain reverence, with a certain appreciation appreciation for the sanctity of the space we're walking into? Do we dress in a different way? Do we act in a different way? Do we speak in a different way? All of those are extensions of Mikdashi Tira, which is contained in this parsha. Second point is not about Mikdashi Tira, but the juxtaposition of these two very different mitzvahs, right? So why is Shabsosai Tishmaru u Mikdashi Tira contained within the same breath, within the same pasuk? They're both important commands, but they could have been separate. Shabsosai Tishmaru, period, sof pasuk. Mikdashi Tira, sof pasuk. Why are they put together? Why are they juxtaposed over here? So Rashi notes, Afal Pishe Animas Hirchem HaMikdash, Shabsosai Tishmaru, Ein Binyan HaMikdash Doche Shabbos. They are juxtaposed to tell us that as important as the Mikdash is in Jewish life, it doesn't override Shabbos. So they had to stop working on the Beis HaMikdash when Shabbos came. This is exactly the same as the beginning of Parshas Vayakel. Vayakel, Moshe gathers the whole Jewish people to build not the Mikdash, but the Mishkan. And over there, he interrupts the flow of the commandments for the Mishkan by telling us about Shabbos. And over there, we learned that Rashi a number of weeks ago, telling us that they're juxtaposed, as Chazal explained, because Hashem wanted to convey to them that as important as the building of the Mikdash was, Shabbos overrides the Mikdash. They had to stop building the Mishkan in order to keep the Shabbos. And I think there's what to think about over here, and I'm going to leave you with that as we enter this rest of Friday and Shabbos, thinking about the importance of Shabbos, thinking about how Shabbos seems to be, except for the ability to preserve life, the Chai B'hem, which we saw earlier in our Parsha, which is really the supreme commandment. Aside from that, Shabbos seems to be the supreme commandment of all. It seems to override all other mitzvos, and it seems to override even the building of the Beis HaMikdash, even the building of the Mishkan, even creating a dwelling place for God in this world. And I'll leave you to think about why. There are many, perhaps many answers to this question, just in terms of the hierarchy of Kedusha. But certainly at a base level, there are two things that at least I notice when I read this Rashi and I think about this juxtaposition and this hierarchy. And number one is that Hashem in time is more sacred than Hashem in space. Or said differently, that as much as we create spaces in our physical world for God, even though God is not contained in spaces, right? That's really it's a concession to our human understanding and our human nature, which is that we understand things in the way that we experience them in our world. So even though God is not of our world and God is not retained by any kind of space, we build spaces. We build a Mishkan, we build a Mikdash, so that us in our human way can relate to a space of holiness, a space of Kedusha, even though God's Kedusha is everywhere. So in a certain way, it's on a lower level than Shabbos, which is God, the experience of God in time, which is an experience that we have as humans, but also that God shares with us. We experience in some way, kiviyachol, the same experience of Kedusha in time, whereas our experience of Kedusha in space is tailored to our human weaknesses, to our human nature, and not really the way that God experiences it, so to speak. That's one approach that I think can hopefully frame your thoughts about this juxtaposition as you think about them over the course of this holy, wonderful Shabbos ahead. I wish you all the best and Shabbat Shalom.
Just to say,
So, Rabbi?
Yeah.
Just to say one thing, that the first lesson that I